deal-maker. He's a deal-making kind of guy, and if there's anybody who can do it there, he can. And that's important. In the House, it's a little bit more decentralized. I mean, I think this group of 20 and 20 is a good group, and there's other Democrats and Republicans that can, come together and increase numbers, and that puts pressure on the Republican and Democratic leadership when you start having the members working together, saying, here's some good ideas, here's some potential fixes we can agree on. So by no means is it certainty, but with my job, I have to remain optimistic to go to work and do good things. But I do think it's, I think it's 50-50 or north of 50-50 that we can get a bipartisan improvements to the Affordable Care Act. Modest. I mean, I don't think it's going to be universal health care. I mean, we're not going to do all these cost-cutting measures that I'd like to save money, but I think there'll be some sensible improvements. And I think they'll be popular, by the way. I mean, it'll make both parties want to look good. They should work together to do things that make sense, It's one of the reasons that, the approval rating in Congress, I think, is like 11% in the last poll I saw.
I'm worried a little bit, I'm curious if you're worried on a more general topic about youth involvement and in current elections in the future. Is there any efforts that's being done to see if more youths can be involved, and what are your opinions on that?
Thank you for coming here. One, I'm glad we asked the question because I want to find out what we are going to do to connect with the younger crowd because they are our future. So, and I'm looking for someone like sorry, I'm looking for someone like Justin Trudeau who can connect with anyone, whether it's conservative or the open-minded. So those are my thoughts.
There's a looming crisis in public education. There are reports that Colorado will be 3,000 plus teachers short in the next few years. Public education in Colorado has endured painful budget cuts, teacher reductions, large class sizes, crumbling buildings, insufficient fundings for years. Colorado ranks close to the bottom for pupil funding when compared with the 49 other states. If you're elected governor, how will you address the critical needs of public education? In our state, and will you make public education a priority for your administration?
So, a lot of great questions. So on youth participation, just let me talk about in our own small way what our office does. We have a youth advisory council, so if you or your friends are in a local high school, we have students from Monarch and Centaurus and Fairview, Boulder High, and Larimer County too. So contact our office afterwards, and we have a great student advisory group. And then we also have an internship program, both here and in Washington, and that's for mostly college students, but we always have a couple high school students too. Fort Collins, Boulder, what's that? Okay, Fort Collins, Boulder, and we in Washington, D.C. So we love to have that at that local level. I guess there's one more question before I get to all of them. Go ahead.
I'm wondering about the status of state and federal funding for public universities and what changes have been made and what changes we can expect to see within the administration of this government.
Very good question. So I think, by the way, I think that young people are seeing what's going on in the country, and there is a resurgence in civic participation, right? So when you go look at the marches, that many people might have been at, just as often than not, it's the 19-year-old dragging the mom and dad to it as opposed to the mom and dad dragging the 19-year-old to it. It works both ways, I'm sure, in different families, but you see that quite a bit. And so you see, by the way, my dad is here. I point to him because he was in the 60s and 70s, he was out there doing it. So you see, and he's out there again on climate and everything else. But you don't just see people who were there in the 60s and 70s. You see people who are, in fact, a lot of those organizers of those individual groups of marches, they're 22, they're 24, it's a whole new generation. Sometimes resistance spawns this kind of civic participation. So hopefully you see that among your peers, and sometimes it needs to be directed into productive directions. Hopefully one of those will be the political areas in terms of voting, registering to vote, working for electoral causes you believe in. That's very important. If people just march and don't vote, it won't change things. So we are facing some devastating budget cuts, both K-12 and higher ed. In this particular forum, as a congressperson, I'm not able to talk about an agenda for the state, but I can certainly talk about the fact that I'm now the ranking Democrat on the Early Childhood and K-12 subcommittee. So I am often the counterpoint to Betsy DeVos' attack on public education. The Republican budget, they zero out Title II teacher training funds, which districts will still have to do. They're going to have to siphon funds out of the classroom then to pay for professional development, putting further pressure on districts. Title I cuts and new formulas for the free and reduced lunch money. So we're very worried about both the policies and the funding and the rhetoric, frankly, which is hurtful for those who are professional educators. And so we stand up against that. On the same time, we're trying to lay out what our agenda would look like. And certainly at the state level and federal level, that agenda includes more investments in early childhood education, preschool and kindergarten. We're working on a bill in Congress to encourage states to move towards universal preschool and kindergarten. Hope to introduce that in the coming weeks. And the federal role is limited in education, as you know, which is probably a good thing with the current secretary, but it's about 8 or 9% of education funding. So most of the education enterprise is locally driven and state. But the federal piece is very important because the biggest program, Free Reduced Lunch, tries to address some of the disparities in income levels. And so schools that serve a higher percentage of low-income families have an extra 1 or 2 or 3 literacy coaches or teachers that are funded out of that funding stream that help them meet the educational challenges of their kids. And that's kind of what's in danger, some of the cutbacks in that area. We're also worried about higher education. The benchmark federal programs of Pell Grants and federally backed student loans help to make college affordable for so many families. And again, there's different discussion. We haven't seen what they propose yet. Let me give the classes half full. It is a potential area for bipartisanship. The Higher Education Act is up for reauthorization. There are a number of initiatives that, remember, Republicans control it also. It's their choice. They can do something non-bipartisan or bipartisan. But if they do something bipartisan, we actually have a number of good ideas to help reduce costs of higher education. One is a bipartisan bill I have to replace the student loan payments with income-based repayment universally. So you don't pay anything up to a certain income level, and then you just pay a certain percentage of your income above that, and whether it takes 8 years or 30 years to pay off your loans. So it's an option for many borrowers today, but it would become the default option, replacing the complex system of kind of loan forgiveness and timeouts and all of those things. So it cut red tape, pass the savings along to borrowers. Another one is encouraging delinking it's called outcome-based education, delinking the seat time requirement with the student loan. So basically saying, it's for both online programs like CSU Global, but also it allows for more experimentation at institutions like CU and Metro. They would be able to, if they can demonstrate that the student acquires the knowledge, get funding for the course, even if it doesn't have so many credit hours of actual seat time. So we still require, it's a very old-fashioned approach, actual class seat time in higher ed to be able to borrow to pay for it. And so we want to, without obviously opening the door to bad operators, we're going to have strong accountability. That's where it's sometimes hard if we want to have the Republicans on board. So therefore this concept that they're weak on the accountability side. So we support it if we have strong accountability, right? If you actually can show that the students are learning and mastering the content. We want, you should be rewarded if you can truly get a student to a Bachelor of Arts degree mastery in 2.5 years instead of 4. There should actually be an incentive for that, right? Rather than basically the incentive for universities to draw it out, which is what they have today, even if they're capable of achieving it. Another great one in Colorado and nationally that we highlight is dual and concurrent enrollment, and Monarch has a program for that. Many school district students, where students can take college credit courses at a local community college while in high school, essentially at no cost to themselves. And so we have even entire schools in the state. Weld 6 School District in Greeley has an early college academy where every student graduates high school with an associate's degree. So they have that today, the district operates that. So this is permissible, and it's one that we are trying to do. In the last Congress session, we replaced No Child Left Behind with the Every Student Succeeds Act. It was a great bipartisan success, not everything we wanted to be, but far better than the No Child Left Behind. Among that was we freed up resources for dual and concurrent enrollment. If we do the Higher Education Act this session, we're going to do that on the community college side to try to target specific partnership resources to encourage community colleges to work with school districts.
All these partnerships are at the
All these partnerships are at the local level, but we can at least encourage and facilitate them through national policy. So those are some things that are very exciting, both, by the way, I think doing the current enrollment, both for students who are going on to four-year universities, who might have the cost and time reduced by 25 or 50%, getting a four-year degree if they complete transferable credit in high school, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, across the system, for students who aren't going to go to college, to graduate with a marketable skill that they can then get a decent job.
About cybersecurity. A couple of months ago, Solar City came by our house to do a bid on putting solar on our house, and they have an internet-connected regulator that's part of their system. And when I asked them about information assurance, the answer that I got from them was kind of, huh? They didn't really have a knowledgeable answer. This is a device that's connected to the power grid, much less internet-connected being monitors and things like that. What is your office doing? Are you aware of any initiatives to establish a minimum set of guidelines and regulations requirements for internet-connected devices? Or if not direct regulation, which may not be supported by the Republican Congress, at least an establishment of liability for the device that is in cyber attack?
If you could actually, could you write down, we'll get your contact information because it's a specific question. I'll have to follow up with you on the phone a little bit later. So if you could write down your information or call a number on there, I'll call you back.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I'm a big believer in net neutrality, and as far as I can tell, most people who understand the issue and aren't being paid by the telecommunications company agree that it's essential for the future of the internet. We've submitted millions of comments to the FCC, and the chairman appears determined to ignore public opinion on this issue. What else can we do, and what are you doing to continue the fight for net neutrality?
So, well, that's a very specific thing. I'm not aware of it, so I'll call you and we'll follow up. We should have basic protocols for that. One of the big fights we had, frankly, was just at the PUC in Denver around the net metering to make sure that people got full credit for energy they put back on the grid. But in terms of the actual protocols and protections, I'll be happy to study up on those. And some of those might even be at the state level as opposed to the federal level. I joined you and millions of others in providing feedback during the open comment period, and I posted my letter at polis.house.gov, and millions of people did. And what is happening, for those of you who kind of hear the term and aren't quite sure what it means, is it does affect you. I mean, assuming you use cable and you probably get your internet through Comcast, as many of us do, I do. What it effectively would do is it's a huge giveaway to the telecom and cable companies, effectively enabling them to kind of establish their own internet rather than having a universal access equal internet. It would allow, for instance, large sites, it would allow them to get money from large content sites that, let's say, want to stream video. And then you as a consumer would no longer have the choice of whatever content streaming you want. You would effectively have a slower or lower rated internet for sites that don't pay up to Comcast and only have faster access to sites that pay a slotting fee to allow them to access Comcast's higher tier communications. Not to mention, they can also cater their own content that they create. And not to mention also that this is very damaging to startups and tomorrow's great disruptor, because when you're starting the beauty of the internet is you can create a new content or service, put a server in your garage or hire one in the cloud, and you have access to a world of customers. This would effectively prevent that by giving your customers who would have access at a slower speed than they would to the big players who would pay the cable companies. So it's a very dangerous direction. The reason it's being discussed is Chairman Pai at the FCC is currently contemplating opening up the net neutrality rules that were put in place to protect net neutrality under President Obama. There was a public comment period. Did anybody else here give public comments on the net neutrality? Wow, that's what an amazing audience. Give yourself a round of applause. I'm really happy to see that. And I did as well. So we'll see what they do, right? I mean, I know that the content was, the comments were overwhelming, and we'll see what Chairman Pai and the Commission do. But I think it's important, if they move the wrong way, to take it back to Congress and try to pass a net neutrality regime and statute, because either way, it's going to be important. Iran, thank you. So, I mean, first of all, thank goodness this president has not yet unilaterally pulled out of the Iran deal. He's, by everybody around him, generals, everybody, is cautioning him to, be cautious about any rash action. So, thus far, we're still in the deal with Iran. There's not a lot Congress can do at this point. We added an additional sanctions in the North Korea and Russia sanctions bill unrelated to nuclear due to these are for Iran's other violations. But certainly we can continue to encourage President Trump to listen to the responsible people around him. I do work on the kratom issue, and frankly, I would also put medical marijuana in with that. To the extent that kratom or medical marijuana can be used as an alternative to prescription opioids, it can really help make a dent in the opioid epidemic. Now, they're not going to work every time because some people need the opioids for very severe pain management, but I think there's some overlap, and so if there's some people who can get off of prescription opioids or not go on them in the first place, preferably, because medical marijuana or kratom or something else might work for them, that's a vastly favorable scenario. So we did last year, 2 years ago, when they talked about adding it to Schedule 1, we helped write a letter to urge them not to. They backed off. I know they're at it again, but we're going to continue to fight on that as well. Somebody talked about human rights, as well as both transgender and Muslim Americans, two groups in particular that are under fire. I've been to our mosques in Fort Collins and Boulder, expressing solidarity with our Muslim community, which, and they've also, by the way, both indicated, Fort Collins and Boulder, great appreciation for the community, because they feel that so many community members that they didn't even know have come out just to help them, just to show support, bringing meals to elderly coming in and just introducing themselves and saying, so I mean, they definitely in our community feel that the community outpouring